Get out of our family, you pathetic gold digger. Patricia's voice cut across the wedding reception as 200 guests watched in stunned silence. Camila stood in her emerald dress, tears streaking her makeup, as her mother-in-law's racist attack reached its crescendo. But when Camila pulled out her phone and made just one call, the sky began to thunder with approaching helicopters. Patricia's face went white as a convoy of luxury vehicles raced toward the vineyard. Because the woman she just humiliated as a gold digger was one of the wealthiest oil heiresses in America. But that wasn't even the biggest shock of the night. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. Camila Rodriguez adjusted the flowing ivory silk of her wedding gown, the fabric catching the California morning light streaming through the estate's French doors. Her dark hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, adorned with delicate pearl pins that caught the sunlight. The bright coral lipstick she wore matched the vibrant orange marigolds Jonathan had insisted on for the bouquet, his grandmother's favorite flower. The Beijing acquisition closes Monday, she murmured into her phone, stepping behind the stone pillar of the Getting Ready suite. Transfer the funds through the Cayman accounts. And Rodriguez Holdings needs the quarterly reports by Tuesday. Her assistant's voice crackled through. Ma'am, your mother called 3 times. She's worried about today. Camila's fingers traced the vintage Cartier necklace at her throat, her only obvious display of wealth. Tell her everything goes according to plan. Today changes nothing about who I am. The irony wasn't lost on her. She stood in a $10,000 gown, on property she owned through 17 shell companies, preparing to marry the man she loved while his family believed she worked as a file clerk at Rodriguez Real Estate. They had no idea she was Rodriguez Real Estate, or that Rodriguez Holdings controlled $43 billion in assets across 6 countries. Miss Rodriguez. The wedding planner knocked softly. Your groom is asking for you. Camila ended the call and smoothed her dress. Through the window, she could see the vineyard stretching toward the mountains, rows of autumn vines creating perfect lines across the valley floor. 200 guests mingled on the lawn below, crystal glasses catching sunlight as servers in crisp white uniforms moved between them. She'd bought this estate 3 years ago, the day after Jonathan proposed. He thought she'd found it through her work connections. Another lie in a relationship built on truth everywhere except her bank accounts. Meanwhile, in the estate's main house, Patricia Whitman stood before the antique mirror in the powder room, adjusting her navy blue mother-of-the-bride dress. Her silver hair was pulled into an elegant updo, secured with diamond pins that had belonged to her mother. At 62, she still commanded attention when she entered a room, her posture straight from decades of cotillion training. But her green eyes held no warmth today. Are you certain about the timing? She whispered into her phone, checking that the powder room door remained closed. Crystal's flight lands in 20 minutes, the voice replied. She'll arrive just as they're cutting the cake. I told her exactly what to say about Jonathan never getting over her. Patricia's manicured fingers gripped the phone tighter. And you're sure she'll do it? Make the scene we discussed. For $50,000? She'd claim to be carrying his baby if you asked. Patricia allowed herself a small smile. Crystal Morrison, tall, blonde, everything Jonathan used to date before this Rodriguez woman sank her claws into him. Crystal would create enough chaos to expose the gold digger's true colors. When faced with real competition, Camila would either fight like the street trash Patricia suspected she was, or run like the coward Patricia hoped she was. Mrs. Whitman? A voice called from the hallway. The photographer wants family photos before the ceremony. Coming, Patricia called back, then lowered her voice into the phone. Remember, you never spoke to me. This conversation never happened. She ended the call and checked her reflection one final time. Today, she would save her son from the biggest mistake of his life. The Rodriguez woman might have fooled Jonathan with her act, but Patricia had been watching, investigating, digging into every corner of this girl's past she could find. File clerk at some tiny real estate office. No college degree. Parents who worked in factories in Phoenix. A nobody who'd somehow convinced her brilliant son, Harvard MBA, successful tech entrepreneur, that she was worthy of the Whitman name. Not on Patricia's watch. She stepped into the hallway where Jonathan waited, devastatingly handsome in his charcoal gray tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, brown eyes bright with happiness. At 34, he'd built his own software company from nothing, proved himself independent of family money. But he was still her baby boy, still vulnerable to manipulation from clever women. "Mom, you look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. "Ready to officially welcome Camila to the family?" Patricia's smile felt like broken glass in her mouth. "Oh, darling, I have so many surprises planned for today." The afternoon sun cast golden shadows across the vineyard as 200 guests settled into white wooden chairs arranged in perfect rows. Camila stood at the back of the estate's main house, her hand resting on Jonathan's arm as they prepared for their entrance. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon, the melody drifting across the valley like a promise. "You're trembling," Jonathan whispered, his brown eyes searching her face. In his charcoal tuxedo with the coral pocket square, he looked like something from a magazine cover. "Cold feet." Camila managed a smile, though her stomach churned with more than wedding nerves. Through the French doors, she could see Patricia in the front row, that practiced smile frozen on her face like a mask. Just thinking about how much everything's about to change. If only he knew how prophetic those words were. The bridal march began. Jonathan squeezed her hand once before walking down the aisle to take his place beside Pastor Williams, a kind-faced man from the local Presbyterian church. Camila took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and stepped into the sunlight. Every eye turned toward her. The ivory silk gown flowed behind her like liquid starlight, the hand-sewn beadwork catching the afternoon light. Her bouquet of coral roses and orange marigolds trembled slightly in her hands, but her steps remained steady. She'd walked into boardrooms worth billions. She could walk down this aisle. Patricia's green eyes tracked her movement like a predator watching prey. In the third row, Camila spotted several faces she didn't recognize, guests who weren't on the invitation list she and Jonathan had carefully crafted together. Her internal warning system activated, the same instinct that had saved her from hostile takeovers and corporate sabotage. But Jonathan's smile when she reached the altar made everything else fade. He took her hands in his, and for a moment, the world contained only the two of them. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Williams began, his voice carrying across the vineyard, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Jonathan Maxwell Whitman and Camila Elena Rodriguez in holy matrimony." The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, Jonathan's voice breaking slightly when he promised to love her regardless of what the world thinks, regardless of what anyone says, until my last breath. Camila's throat tightened at the irony. He had no idea how soon that promise would be tested. "You may kiss the bride," Pastor Williams announced. The crowd erupted in applause as Jonathan pulled her close, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that tasted like forever. Camila's heart soared for exactly 30 seconds before she noticed Patricia wasn't clapping. The older woman sat frozen, her hands clenched in her lap, watching the celebration with barely concealed disgust. The cocktail hour flowed seamlessly into dinner. Camila changed into her reception dress, a stunning emerald green number that hugged her curves and fell to just below her knees. The color made her dark skin glow and her eyes sparkle. Jonathan couldn't stop touching her hand, her arm, spinning her on the dance floor as the sun began to set over the mountains. "I love you, Mrs. Whitman," he whispered in her ear during their first dance. "I love you too," she replied, the words catching in her throat. In 3 hours, he might never want to see her again. But for now, wrapped in his arms while Etta James crooned "At Last" through the speakers, she let herself believe in fairy tales. The spell shattered at exactly 8:47 p.m. Camila was accepting congratulations from Jonathan's college friends when she heard the commotion near the entrance. A woman's voice, loud and carrying across the reception area, cut through the jazz music and conversation like a knife. "Where is he? Where's Jonathan?" Camila turned to see a tall blonde woman in a tight red dress striding across the dance floor. Crystal Morrison. Camila recognized her from Jonathan's old photos, though 3 years had added lines around her eyes and a hardness to her mouth that hadn't been there before. "Crystal!" Jonathan appeared at Camila's side, his face a mask of confusion. "What are you doing here?" Crystal's blue eyes filled with theatrical tears. I had to come. I couldn't let you make the biggest mistake of your life without telling you the truth. The music stopped. Conversations died. 200 guests turned to stare as Crystal launched into her performance. I never stopped loving you, Jonathan. These past 3 years, I've been waiting, hoping you'd realize what we had was real. What we had was forever. Her voice rose, carrying across the silent reception. This woman, this Rodriguez girl, she's not who you think she is. She's using you, Jonathan. Can't you see that? Camila felt the crowd's eyes shift to her, measuring, judging. Heat crawled up her neck, but she kept her expression neutral. This was Patricia's move. The timing was too perfect, the theatrics too rehearsed. Crystal, you need to leave. Jonathan's voice carried authority, but Camila could see the confusion in his eyes. This is my wedding day. I'm married now. Whatever we had ended 3 years ago. But it doesn't have to stay ended. Crystal reached for his hand. I've changed, Jonathan. I'm ready for the life you wanted. Marriage, children, everything I was too scared to give you before. Miss Morrison. Patricia's voice cut through the drama like silk over steel. She rose from her seat at the head table, her navy dress impeccable, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. How wonderful that you could join us for this celebration. The way she said, celebration, made it sound like a funeral. Crystal's eyes brightened as she spotted her co-conspirator. Mrs. Whitman, I'm so sorry for the disruption, but I had to speak my truth. Jonathan deserves to know that real love still exists for him. Of course, dear. Patricia's voice dripped false sympathy. True love should never be silenced. Camila watched the performance with growing fury. The coordination was flawless. Patricia providing the setup, Crystal delivering the emotional manipulation, all designed to humiliate her in front of everyone who mattered to Jonathan. That's enough. Camila stepped forward, her voice calm but carrying across the reception area. Crystal, I don't know what game you're playing, but this is my wedding day. You need to leave. Now. Crystal's face twisted into something ugly. Your wedding day? You think you've won something? You think because you managed to trick a good man into marrying you that you belong in this world? I belong wherever my husband wants me, Camila replied evenly. And he's made his choice very clear. Has he? Patricia's voice joined the fray, sweet as poisoned honey. Or has he simply been influenced by someone very skilled at manipulation? The crowd pressed closer, phones appearing as guests began recording the drama. Camila could see the headlines already. Tech entrepreneur's wedding disrupted by ex-girlfriend's dramatic declaration. Love triangle explodes at Sonoma wine country wedding. Mother! Jonathan's voice carried a warning. What are you doing? Patricia's mask finally slipped, revealing the venom underneath. I'm saving you from a mistake that will destroy your life. This woman is not who she pretends to be, Jonathan. She's a nobody. A file clerk who saw an opportunity and took it. The words hit the reception like a bomb. Guests gasped, whispered, pulled out their phones to capture the unfolding drama. Camila felt the familiar sting of racial coding in Patricia's words. Nobody. Opportunist. File clerk. All ways of saying, she's beneath us without using the words that would make the racism too obvious. She works at some tiny real estate office, Jonathan, Patricia continued, her voice rising with each word. Her parents are factory workers. She has no education, no breeding, no class. She's using you for your money and your name, and you're too blinded by infatuation to see it. The silence that followed was deafening. Camila felt 200 pairs of eyes dissecting her, measuring her worth against Patricia's words. The familiar weight of judgment, the assumption that a brown woman in a wealthy space must be there under false pretenses. Is that what you really think of me? Camila's voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the reception area. That I'm some gold digger who trapped your son? I think you're exactly what you appear to be, Patricia shot back. A clever little nobody who saw an opportunity and seized it. But this charade ends now. I will not watch my son throw his life away on someone so unsuitable. The word unsuitable hung in the air like smoke. Everyone heard what she really meant. Crystal stepped forward, emboldened by Patricia's attack. "Jonathan, you have to see it now. She's not one of us. She'll never be one of us. You deserve someone who understands your world, your family, your expectations." Jonathan's face had gone pale, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Stop. Both of you, just stop." But Patricia wasn't finished. She'd waited 3 years for this moment, planned every word, every gesture. "Look around you, Camila. Look at these guests. Do you see yourself in any of them? Do you honestly believe you belong in this world? Because I can promise you, the novelty will wear off. Jonathan will realize what a mistake he's made, and when he does, you'll be left with nothing." The cruelty of it took Camila's breath away. Not just the words, but the calculated timing, the public humiliation, the way Patricia had orchestrated everything to cause maximum damage. This wasn't just about disapproval. This was about destruction. "You want me to leave?" Camila's voice remained steady, though her heart was breaking. "You want me to walk away from my own wedding reception?" "I want you to do what's best for everyone involved," Patricia replied, her tone suddenly reasonable, almost kind. "Save yourself the embarrassment of discovering what everyone here already knows. You don't belong in this family. You never will." The reception area was dead silent. Even the staff had stopped moving, frozen by the unfolding drama. Camila could feel Jonathan beside her, vibrating with barely controlled rage, but she held up a hand to stop him from speaking. She reached into her small beaded purse and pulled out her phone. The guests probably thought she was calling an Uber, preparing to flee in humiliation exactly as Patricia had planned. Instead, she scrolled to a contact simply labeled "Home" and pressed call. "It's time," she said quietly when the phone was answered. "Bring everything." The line went dead. Camila slipped the phone back into her purse and turned to face Patricia with a smile that could have melted steel. "You know what, Patricia? You're absolutely right about one thing. This charade does end the silence stretched like a taut wire across the reception area." Camila's words hung in the evening air while 200 guests held their collective breath, waiting for the next explosion. Patricia's green eyes narrowed as she tried to decode the confident smile playing across her daughter-in-law's lips. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Patricia demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut crystal. Camila smoothed the emerald fabric of her reception dress and turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this interruption to what should be a celebration of love. Sometimes family dynamics require a bit of clarification." Jonathan stepped closer to his wife, his jaw set in a hard line. "Mother, you owe Camila an apology. This is completely unacceptable." "I owe her nothing," Patricia snapped, her composure finally cracking completely. "And neither do you. 3 years. Jonathan. 3 years I've watched this woman manipulate you, isolate you from your family, turn you against everyone who truly cares about you." Crystal nodded enthusiastically from beside Patricia, her red dress catching the string lights overhead. "She's right, Jonathan. You've changed since you've been with her. You used to call your mother every week. You used to come to family events. Now it's like you're ashamed of where you come from." "I'm ashamed of this." Jonathan gestured broadly at the scene unfolding before him. "I'm ashamed that my mother would ambush my wife on our wedding day. I'm ashamed that my ex-girlfriend would show up uninvited to cause drama. But I'm not ashamed of my wife." Patricia's laugh was bitter as autumn wind. "Your wife. Jonathan, you've known this woman for 3 years. 3 years during which she's told you almost nothing about herself. Do you know her parents' names? Do you know where she went to school? Do you know anything about her life before she appeared in yours like some convenient miracle?" The accusation hit closer to home than Patricia could have known. Camila had indeed kept most of her past hidden, though not for the reasons Patricia assumed. Every carefully constructed lie had been designed to protect the man she loved from the complications her true identity would bring. "I know everything I need to know," Jonathan replied, but Camila could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. The doubt Patricia had been planting for months was finally taking root. "Do you?" Patricia pressed her advantage. Did you know she's been making mysterious phone calls during your engagement? Hushed conversations she ends the moment you enter the room? Did you know she disappears for hours at a time with vague explanations about work emergencies? Camilla's heart sank as she watched Jonathan's expression shift. Those phone calls had been business, managing her empire from the shadows. Those disappearances had been board meetings, acquisition discussions, the endless responsibilities of running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. But she couldn't explain without revealing everything, and she wasn't ready for that conversation in front of 200 strangers. That's enough. Camilla's voice cut through Patricia's monologue like a blade. I think some of us need to have a private conversation. She turned toward the estate's main house, her heels clicking against the stone patio. Jonathan, would you join me inside? We need to talk. Running away already? Crystal called after her, emboldened by Patricia's attack. That's exactly what I expected from someone like you. Camilla stopped walking, turned, fixed Crystal with a stare that could have frozen wine in the glass. Someone like me? Crystal's blue eyes glittered with malice. Someone who doesn't belong. Someone who's in over her head. Someone who thought she could fake her way into a world that would never truly accept her. The racial subtext wasn't even subtle anymore. Camilla felt the familiar fire building in her chest, the same rage that had driven her to build her business empire from nothing, to prove wrong every person who had ever underestimated her because of her skin color or her background. But she also felt something else. Disappointment. Not in Patricia or Crystal, whose bigotry was exactly what she'd expected. Disappointment in the guests who were recording this humiliation instead of speaking up. Disappointment in Jonathan's friends who stood silent while his wife was attacked. Disappointment in the system that had taught her to expect exactly this kind of treatment. You're right about one thing, Crystal, Camilla said quietly. I am someone who doesn't belong in your world. Your world is small, petty, and built on tearing others down to make yourself feel bigger. I wouldn't want to belong there. She continued toward the house, Jonathan falling into step beside her. Behind them, she could hear Patricia rallying the crowd, her voice carrying across the reception area as she painted herself as the protective mother saving her son from a dangerous manipulator. She's poison, Patricia declared to anyone who would listen. Mark my words, within a year she'll have drained his accounts and disappeared. These people always do. These people. There it was. The mask completely off now. Jonathan's hand found Camilla's as they reached the French doors leading into the estate's main house. His touch was warm, solid, but she could feel the tremor of uncertainty in his fingers. Camilla, he began, his voice low. What she said about the phone calls, about you being secretive. There's some truth to that, isn't there? They stepped into the estate's grand foyer, decorated with autumn flowers and soft lighting that had seemed so romantic just hours earlier. Now it felt like a stage set for a tragedy. Yes, Camilla admitted, because she'd never been able to lie to him about the big things. There are things about my life that I haven't told you, but not for the reasons your mother thinks. Then why? Jonathan's brown eyes searched her face. Help me understand, because right now I'm standing between my wife and my family, and I don't know what to believe. Before Camilla could answer, Patricia's voice grew louder outside. Through the windows, they could see her holding court near the head table, Crystal beside her like a supporting actress in a carefully scripted drama. She targeted him, Patricia was saying to a cluster of guests that included Jonathan's business partners and college friends. I've done my research. 3 years ago, she started showing up everywhere he went. The coffee shop near his office. The gym where he worked out. The charity events he attended. It wasn't coincidence. It was stalking. Camilla's blood turned to ice. Patricia had been investigating her, following the breadcrumbs of their courtship, twisting every genuine moment into something sinister. The coffee shop where they'd met because Camilla owned the building and was checking on her investment. The charity events because her foundation was one of the largest donors. The gym because it was close to her secret corporate offices. She's rewriting our entire love story, Camilla whispered, watching through the window as more guests gathered around Patricia's poison circle. Making it sound like I hunted you down. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the scene outside. When he spoke, his voice was strained. Did you target me, were any of those meetings actually coincidental? The question hit like a physical blow. You think I'm capable of that? You think I spent 3 years manipulating you into falling in love with me? I think there are things about you I don't know, Jonathan replied carefully. And right now, with my mother out there destroying your reputation in front of everyone we know, I need you to help me defend you. I need the truth, Camila. All of it. Outside, Patricia's audience was growing. Phones were recording, social media posts were being crafted. The story of the gold digger who crashed the Whitman wedding was already spreading beyond the vineyard. Camila could see her carefully constructed life crumbling in real time. The truth is complicated, she said finally. More complicated than this? Jonathan gestured toward the window where Patricia was now showing something on her phone to the gathered crowd. Probably photographs, or documents, or whatever evidence she'd compiled during her investigation. Camila's own phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down to see a single line from her assistant. 20 minutes. Are you sure about this? 20 minutes until her world collided with his. 20 minutes until Patricia's small-minded bigotry met the full force of Rodriguez Holdings. 20 minutes until the gold digger revealed herself to be richer than everyone at this wedding combined. But looking at Jonathan's face, seeing the doubt Patricia had so skillfully planted, Camila wondered if it was already too late. The damage wasn't just to her reputation. It was to the foundation of their relationship, built on trust that was now cracking under the weight of her necessary deceptions. I need you to trust me for 20 more minutes, she said, reaching for his hands. Can you do that? Can you stand by me for 20 more minutes without knowing everything? Jonathan's grip tightened around her fingers. She's out there telling everyone you're a con artist. My business partners are hearing this. My friends, my colleagues. If this goes viral... It won't matter, Camila said with more confidence than she felt. I promise you, Jonathan. In 20 minutes, none of this will matter. Through the window, they watched Patricia hold up what looked like printed documents. The crowd leaned in closer, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the string lights overhead. Whatever she was showing them, it was having the desired effect. Guests were gasping, shaking their heads, shooting glances toward the main house where Camila and Jonathan had disappeared. Look at them, Patricia's voice carried through the glass. Look at how she's isolated him already. Pulled him away from his family, his friends, everyone who could warn him about what she really is. It's textbook manipulation. Crystal nodded sagely beside her. She knew exactly what she was doing from day one. Jonathan was vulnerable after our breakup. She saw an opportunity and she took it. The crowd murmured agreement, heads nodding in unison. The narrative was setting like concrete. Poor Jonathan, seduced by a clever opportunist. Poor Patricia, trying to save her son from a devastating mistake. Poor Crystal, the heartbroken ex-girlfriend who still loved him enough to risk public humiliation to save him. And Camila? Camila was the villain in this story. The outsider who had crashed their exclusive party and needed to be expelled before she could do more damage. I should go back out there, Jonathan said, though he made no move toward the door. I should defend you. Against what, exactly? Camila asked quietly. She's not technically lying about most of it. I do work at a real estate office. My parents did work in factories. I don't have the same educational background as your friends. I don't move in the same social circles. Everything she's saying is true, just missing context. Context that you won't share with me. The accusation hung between them like a chasm. Camila wanted to tell him everything. Wanted to explain about the oil investments, the real estate empire, the technology patents that generated millions in passive income every month. Wanted to reveal that the little real estate office, where she supposedly worked, was actually the headquarters of a corporation that owned half of downtown Phoenix and was expanding into California markets. But she also wanted to protect him from the reality of what her life truly entailed. The security details, the corporate espionage, the family members who would suddenly become very interested in their relationship once they learned about her wealth. She'd seen what extreme wealth did to relationships, had watched it destroy her parents' marriage and poison her siblings' connections to anyone outside their carefully vetted circle. Her phone buzzed again. ETA 15 minutes. Helicopter just landed at Napa County Airport. Your mother sends her love. Camila's heart skipped. Her mother was coming. Elena Rodriguez, the woman who had built an oil empire from a single well in West Texas, who had taught her daughter that true power was quiet power, was about to make her first public appearance in 5 years. This was about to become much bigger than a wedding day confrontation. Camila! Jonathan's voice pulled her back to the moment. Whatever happens next, I need you to know that I love you. That hasn't changed. But I also need to understand what I've gotten myself into. Outside, Patricia's voice rose again, triumphant and cruel. She's probably in there right now, trying to come up with new lies to explain away the evidence. But the truth always comes out eventually. Camila looked at her husband, her heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. In 15 minutes, Patricia would learn exactly how wrong she was about everything. But would Jonathan forgive her for keeping the truth hidden for so long? The truth is coming, she whispered. Ready or not. The sound of approaching footsteps on the marble foyer floor made both Camila and Jonathan turn toward the estate's main entrance. Through the etched glass doors, they could see Patricia's silhouette flanked by several wedding guests, their voices carrying through the evening air like an approaching storm. Jonathan, darling, we need to talk, Patricia called through the door, her tone deceptively sweet. All of us. As a family. Camila's stomach clenched. The last thing she needed was a family confrontation with witnesses before her cavalry arrived. She glanced at her phone. 12 minutes. We're having a private conversation, Mother, Jonathan called back, his voice strained with barely controlled frustration. Privacy is exactly what got us into this mess, Patricia replied, her sweetness curdling into something sharper. Camila, dear, surely you're not afraid to face the family you've married into? The challenge was obvious, designed to make Camila look guilty if she refused. Through the glass, she could see Crystal hovering behind Patricia like a shark scenting blood in the water. Several of Jonathan's business partners flanked them, their faces carefully neutral but their presence intimidating. Fine, Camila said, surprising Jonathan. Let them in. Let's have this conversation. Jonathan's hand found her arm. You don't have to do this. We can leave. Go upstairs. Wait for them to calm down. Running would only prove their point, Camila replied, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Besides, I'm curious to see what evidence your mother thinks she has. Jonathan moved to unlock the front door, and Patricia swept in like a conquering queen, her navy dress rustling with authority. Crystal followed close behind, flanked by 4 of Jonathan's business associates. Tom Bradley from his venture capital firm, Dr. Stevens from the medical technology company they'd partnered with, Jennifer Walsh from the marketing agency handling his latest product launch, and surprisingly, Marcus Chen, Jonathan's college roommate and current CFO. Camila, Patricia said with false warmth, I'm so glad you've decided to stop hiding. We really do need to clear the air. The group arranged themselves in the estate's formal living room, an elegant space with cream-colored sofas and a stone fireplace that had been decorated with autumn flowers for the wedding. Patricia took the central armchair like a judge claiming her bench, while Crystal perched on the sofa arm beside her. The business associates spread out strategically, blocking the exits without appearing to do so intentionally. Camila recognized the setup immediately. Corporate intimidation, designed to make the target feel outnumbered and overwhelmed. She'd used similar tactics herself during hostile acquisitions, though never against family. This feels like an intervention, Jonathan said dryly, remaining standing behind Camila's chair in a gesture of solidarity that made her heart ache. In a way, it is, Dr. Stevens said gently. He was a kind-faced man in his 50s whom Jonathan had known for years. Jonathan, we care about you. We're concerned about some things we've learned. Marcus Chen, normally one of Jonathan's closest friends, pulled out his phone and placed it on the coffee table. I hired a private investigator, John. I'm sorry, but after some of the things Patricia told me, I had to know what we were dealing with. Camila's blood turned to ice. A private investigator. Her carefully constructed cover identity had been professional grade, designed to withstand casual scrutiny, but a determined investigation could potentially uncover inconsistencies. "You hired a private investigator to spy on my wife?" Jonathan's voice was dangerously quiet. "To protect you," Marcus replied firmly. "And I'm glad I did. Camila Rodriguez doesn't exist. At least, not the version she's presented to you." Patricia's smile was triumphant. "Tell them what you found, Marcus." Marcus tapped his phone screen and pulled up a digital report. "The story about working at Rodriguez Real Estate? It's technically true, but she's not a file clerk. She's listed as a senior consultant, but there's no record of her salary, no employee benefits, no traditional employment documentation. It's like she's a ghost employee." Camila forced her expression to remain neutral, though her mind was racing. They'd found the shell position she'd created to explain her daytime activities. Sloppy of her to leave inconsistencies, but she'd never expected Jonathan's own friends to investigate her. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "her background before 3 years ago is remarkably thin. No social media presence, no college records, no employment history. For someone who's supposedly 31 years old, she appears to have sprung into existence right around the time she met Jonathan." Crystal leaned forward eagerly. "It's like she erased her past and created a new identity specifically to target him." "That's not—" Jonathan began, but Tom Bradley cut him off. "There's more, John. The financial picture doesn't add up either. She drives a Honda Civic, claims to live in a modest apartment, but somehow she's wearing a $15,000 necklace and carrying a handbag that costs more than most people's monthly salary." Camila's hand instinctively moved to the Cartier necklace at her throat. She'd been careless, allowing herself small luxuries that her supposed income couldn't support. "Maybe Jonathan bought them for her," Jennifer Walsh suggested, though her tone made it clear she doubted this explanation. "I offered," Jonathan said quietly. "She always refused expensive gifts. Said she didn't need them." "How convenient," Patricia purred. Appearing modest while secretly accumulating luxuries she couldn't possibly afford on her claimed salary. "The question is, where is the money coming from?" The room fell silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Outside, Camila could hear the reception continuing, music and laughter drifting through the windows like sounds from another world. Her phone buzzed. 8 minutes. "Well," Patricia demanded, "don't you have anything to say in your defense? Any explanation for these discrepancies?" Camila met her mother-in-law's gaze steadily. "I have explanations for everything, but I don't owe them to you." "You owe them to your husband," Marcus shot back. "Jonathan deserves to know who he married." "Marcus," Jonathan's voice carried a warning. "You're my friend, but she's my wife. Back off." "Am I your friend?" Marcus challenged. "Because a real friend wouldn't let you walk blindfolded into financial ruin. Do you have any idea what a divorce from someone with hidden assets could cost you? What if she's been documenting your wealth, planning to take half of everything you've built?" The accusation hit Jonathan like a physical blow. Camila could see him recoiling, the doubt Patricia had planted growing stronger with each revelation. "That's not what this is," Camila said firmly. "I'm not after his money." "Then what are you after?" Crystal demanded. "Because something brought you into Jonathan's orbit, and it wasn't coincidence. The investigator traced your movements from 3 years ago. You started appearing at locations Jonathan frequented 2 weeks before you accidentally met him at that coffee shop." Camila's heart sank. They'd mapped her surveillance of Jonathan's routine, not understanding that she'd been protecting a potential investment, not stalking a romantic target. The coffee shop had been part of a real estate portfolio she was considering purchasing. She'd noticed Jonathan there during her site visits, thought he was attractive, but hadn't approached him until fate finally put them in the same line one morning. "It looks bad, Camila," Dr. Stevens said gently. "From the outside, it looks like calculated pursuit." "Because that's exactly what it was," Patricia declared. "She researched my son like he was a business acquisition. Learned his habits, his preferences, his vulnerabilities. Then she positioned herself to meet him at precisely the right moment to seem like destiny instead of manipulation. Jonathan sank into the chair beside Camilla, his face pale. "Is that true? Did you know who I was before we met?" Camilla's throat felt lined with sandpaper. "I knew of you, but not the way they're implying." "What does that mean?" he pressed. Before she could answer, Marcus dropped another bombshell. "There's something else, John." The investigator found financial records suggesting she's been receiving large wire transfers from offshore accounts. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 2 years. Offshore accounts. Jennifer Walsh gasped. "That sounds like money laundering." "Or worse," Patricia added ominously. "Who knows what kind of criminal enterprises those accounts might be connected to?" Camilla's phone buzzed again. 5 minutes. Her mother's helicopter was probably circling the estate right now, looking for a place to land. Soon, these accusations would seem laughably small, but the damage to her relationship with Jonathan might already be irreversible. "I'm not a criminal," she said firmly. "Those transfers are legitimate business transactions." "What business?" Marcus demanded. "You work as a file clerk, remember? What possible business could generate that kind of international money movement?" The trap was closing around her. Every truth she could tell would require revealing bigger truths she wasn't ready to share. Every lie would dig the hole deeper. She was caught between protecting Jonathan from the complexity of her real life and saving their marriage from the destruction his family was orchestrating. "I can't explain right now," she said finally. "But I will. Soon. Very soon." "Can't or won't?" Patricia pressed. "Because there's a difference between having secrets and being a fraud." Crystal nodded enthusiastically. "She's had 3 years to tell you the truth, Jonathan. 3 years of marriage preparation, engagement, planning a life together. If she hasn't told you by now, what makes you think she ever will?" Jonathan's hands were clenched in his lap, his knuckles white with tension. "Camilla, these people are suggesting you might be involved in something illegal. That you might be using me for money laundering or worse. You have to give me something to work with here." "I'm not involved in anything illegal," she repeated. "Everything I do is completely legitimate and above board." "Then prove it," Patricia challenged. "Show U.S. bank statements, employment records, tax returns. If you're innocent, transparency should be easy." The irony was crushing. Camilla could prove her innocence by revealing her wealth, but doing so would confirm that she'd been lying about her identity for 3 years. Either way, she lost. Either she was a criminal or a fraud. Her phone buzzed. 2 minutes. Through the living room windows, she could see guests at the reception pointing toward the sky. The distant sound of helicopter rotors was growing louder, accompanied by what sounded like multiple aircraft approaching from different directions. "What is that?" Tom Bradley asked, moving toward the window. Camilla stood up, smoothing her emerald dress and lifting her chin with a confidence she didn't feel. "That would be my explanation." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" The sound grew louder, unmistakably military-grade helicopters accompanied by the higher whine of private jets circling overhead. Through the windows, they could see the reception guests abandoning their tables to stare at the sky, phones recording the unusual aerial activity. "You wanted proof of who I am," Camilla said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You wanted transparency. You wanted to know where my money comes from and why I was interested in Jonathan." The helicopter noise was deafening now, clearly preparing to land somewhere on the estate grounds. Car engines roared in the distance, multiple vehicles approaching fast along the vineyard's access road. "Well," Camilla continued, watching Patricia's face drain of color as understanding began to dawn. "You're about to get your answers." The first helicopter touched down on the estate's main lawn with military precision, its rotors whipping the autumn air into a frenzy that sent napkins and flower petals dancing across the reception area. Wedding guests scrambled back from their tables, phones raised to capture the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. Through the living room windows, the group watched in stunned silence as the aircraft's doors opened. A woman in her early 60s emerged first, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that spoke of boardroom power rather than social events. Even from a distance, her bearing commanded attention. "Who is that?" Jennifer Walsh whispered, pressing closer to the glass. Camila's throat tightened as she watched her mother step onto the lawn like she owned it. Which, technically, she did. "Elena Rodriguez. My mother. Your mother." Patricia's voice cracked slightly. "You said your parents worked in factories." "I said they worked in factories," Camila corrected quietly. "I never said they still did." The second figure emerging from the helicopter made Jonathan's breath catch. A young man in his late 20s with caramel skin and Jonathan's same dark hair, wearing an expensive navy suit that fit him like it had been tailored in Milan. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to luxury, scanning the crowd with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Jonathan," Camila said softly, "I'd like you to meet your half-brother, Diego Whitman Rodriguez." The silence in the living room was deafening. Jonathan's face had gone completely white, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Patricia swayed on her feet, gripping the back of her chair for support. "That's impossible," Patricia whispered. "I don't have another son." "You had an affair 28 years ago," Camila said, her voice gentle but implacable. "With Elena Rodriguez, who was working as a translator for your husband's oil company. When she got pregnant, you convinced her to disappear rather than destroy your marriage. You paid her $50,000 and made her sign a non-disclosure agreement." Patricia's face was ash-gray now, her green eyes wide with something approaching terror. "How could you possibly know about that?" "Because Elena Rodriguez is one of the most powerful women in America," Camila replied. "And when someone tries to erase your child from existence, you tend to remember every detail." Outside, the second helicopter was landing, disgorging a team of men and women in dark suits who immediately began establishing a security perimeter. A third aircraft circled overhead, its searchlight illuminating the vineyard like a movie set. Marcus Chen's phone was buzzing frantically in his hand. "John, I'm getting calls from my contacts at the financial networks. Someone just triggered every corporate watch list in the system. Rodriguez Holdings is mobilizing." "Rodriguez Holdings?" Tom Bradley's voice was faint. Camila nodded. "My family's company. We control about $43 billion in assets, primarily in oil and natural gas, but we've diversified into real estate, technology, and renewable energy over the past decade." The sound of engines roared louder as a convoy of vehicles crested the hill leading to the estate. First came two black Suburbans with tinted windows, followed by a Rolls-Royce Phantom that gleamed like a dark jewel in the estate's lighting. Behind that, a Bentley Continental, two Mercedes S-Class sedans, and what appeared to be a Ferrari F8 bringing up the rear. "Sweet Jesus," Dr. Stevens breathed. "It's like a presidential motorcade." Crystal had sunk onto the sofa, her earlier bravado completely evaporated. "This isn't possible. People like that don't exist in real life." "People like what?" Camila asked, though she knew exactly what Crystal meant. People with enough money to command private air forces. People who could make phone calls that brought helicopter squadrons and luxury convoys within minutes. People who operated on a level so far above ordinary wealth that they might as well be from another planet. "You're Elena Rodriguez's daughter," Jennifer Walsh said slowly, recognition dawning in her eyes. "The Elena Rodriguez. The oil heiress who disappeared from public life 5 years ago." "She didn't disappear," Camila corrected. "She just stopped giving interviews. She's been quite busy building the largest privately held energy company in North America." Through the windows, they watched Elena Rodriguez stride across the lawn toward the estate's main house, Diego at her side. The woman moved with the confidence of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. Wedding guests parted before her like the Red Sea, their phones capturing every step. "This explains the offshore transfers," Marcus said weakly. "You weren't laundering money. You were moving your own money." "Family money," Camila confirmed. "Trust distributions, investment returns, dividend payments. I've been financially independent since I turned 25. Patricia finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "If you're that wealthy, why were you pretending to be a file clerk? Why the deception? Because of this, Camila gestured toward the window where cars were still arriving, where security personnel were establishing positions around the estate, where her mother was approaching like a force of nature. Because wealth like ours doesn't allow for normal relationships. Because everyone wants something from you, and you never know if someone loves you or loves your money. Jonathan's voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. So you lied to me for 3 years. I protected you for 3 years, Camila countered. Do you see what's happening out there? That's my normal. Security details, corporate jets, every decision analyzed by financial markets. I wanted to know if you could love me without all of this. But you never gave me the choice, Jonathan said, pain bleeding through his voice. You never trusted me enough to tell me the truth. Before Camila could respond, the living room doors opened. Elena Rodriguez entered like she owned the place, which she absolutely did. At 62, she was still strikingly beautiful, her presence filling the room with an energy that made everyone else seem smaller by comparison. Mrs. Whitman, Elena said, her voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of West Texas rather than Mexico. It's been 28 years. You look older. Patricia opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. She was staring at Elena like she was seeing a ghost. Diego followed his mother into the room, and the family resemblance to Jonathan was unmistakable. Same bone structure, same intelligent eyes, same way of carrying himself that suggested confidence without arrogance. Hello, brother, Diego said quietly, extending his hand to Jonathan. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Jonathan stared at the offered hand like it might bite him. This is insane. This is completely insane. Actually, Elena said, settling into an armchair like she was claiming a throne, this is overdue. Patricia, dear, we need to discuss some things. Starting with the non-disclosure agreement you made me sign. Patricia finally found her voice. That agreement is legally binding. You can't. Can't what? Elena's smile was sharp as a blade. Can't reveal that you had an affair with a factory worker and then paid her to disappear when the consequences became inconvenient? Can't mention that you abandoned your own child because he didn't fit your image of racial purity. The accusations hung in the air like smoke. Marcus Chin looked like he wanted to disappear into the furniture. Dr. Stevens was studying his shoes with intense concentration. Crystal appeared to be having some kind of breakdown, her earlier confidence completely shattered. You were married, Patricia said weakly. The affair was mutual. The affair was mutual, Elena agreed. The abandonment was all you. When I told you I was pregnant, you offered me money to disappear. When I said I wanted our son to know his father, you threatened to destroy my life. When I tried to contact you after Diego was born, your lawyers sent cease and desist letters. Diego stepped forward, his voice calm but his eyes blazing. She made me believe my father was dead for the first 15 years of my life. It wasn't until I was old enough to hire my own investigators that I learned the truth. Jonathan's face was a mask of shock and confusion. Dad never mentioned. He never said anything about. Your father doesn't know, Elena said quietly. Patricia made sure of that. The affair happened while he was traveling for business. She managed the situation herself, kept it from everyone, including him. The revelation hit Jonathan like a physical blow. His mother hadn't just hidden an affair. She'd hidden an entire child from his father, manipulated the situation to protect her own reputation, and condemned an innocent baby to grow up believing he'd been abandoned by a dead father. Why are you telling us this now? Patricia asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. Elena's gaze shifted to her daughter. Because tonight, you attacked my child. You called her a gold digger, a nobody, someone unworthy of your family. You tried to humiliate her at her own wedding, destroy her marriage, drive her away from the man she loves. I was protecting my son. You were protecting your prejudices, Elena cut her off. The same prejudices that made you abandon Diego 28 years ago. The same racism that convinced you a brown woman couldn't possibly be worthy of your precious family name. Camila watched her mother with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Elena Rodriguez was magnificent in her fury, a force of nature defending her children with the full weight of her empire behind her. But she was also about to destroy any chance Camila had of rebuilding her relationship with Jonathan. "You want to know who my daughter really is?" Elena continued, pulling out her phone. "She's the youngest board member in Rodriguez Holdings history. She single-handedly negotiated our expansion into renewable energy, a deal worth $12 billion. She owns 40% of the commercial real estate in downtown Phoenix and is currently acquiring properties throughout California." The phone screen displayed financial documents that made Marcus Chen's investigative report look like a child's homework. Asset portfolios worth billions, corporate structures spanning multiple countries, investment returns that dwarfed most people's annual salaries. The little real estate office, where she supposedly works. Elena smiled. "That's the headquarters of Rodriguez West Coast Operations, the company that just purchased controlling interests in 17 Napa Valley wineries, including this estate." Patricia's legs gave out completely. She collapsed into her chair, staring at Elena with dawning horror. "You own this place?" Tom Bradley asked weakly. "Camila owns this place," Elena corrected. "I gave it to her as an engagement present. She's been planning to tell Jonathan after the honeymoon, once they'd had time to adjust to married life." The room fell silent except for the continued sound of helicopters and engines outside. Through the windows, they could see more vehicles arriving, more security personnel taking positions, more evidence of the Rodriguez family's reach and power. "So when you demanded that my daughter leave her own property," Elena continued, her voice soft as silk and deadly as poison, "you weren't just displaying your racism. You were committing trespassing." Jonathan's voice was barely audible. "You've owned this place for how long?" 14 months, Camila said quietly. "I bought it the week after you proposed. I wanted us to have somewhere beautiful for the wedding, somewhere we could come back to for anniversaries." "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed. "John, do you understand what this means? Your wife isn't just wealthy. She's wealthy enough to buy and sell everyone in this room." "Including me?" Jonathan asked, his voice hollow. Camila's heart broke at the question. "Money can't buy love, Jonathan. It can buy almost everything else, but not that. That's why I kept it secret. That's why I wanted you to know me first, love me first, before you knew about any of this." Outside, Elena's security team was organizing the chaos, directing wedding guests back to their tables, establishing a perimeter that suggested the evening's revelations were far from over. "There's more, isn't there?" Patricia asked, though she looked like she was afraid to hear the answer. Elena's smile was predatory. "Oh, Patricia, we're just getting started." Elena Rodriguez stood in the center of the living room like a queen holding court, her presence commanding absolute attention. The sound of helicopters had faded to a distant hum, but the convoy of luxury vehicles outside served as a constant reminder that this was no longer an ordinary wedding reception. "Patricia," Elena said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of suppressed anger, "you made a critical error tonight. You assumed my daughter was powerless. You assumed she had no family to defend her. You assumed wrong." Patricia sat frozen in her chair, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. The woman who had orchestrated Camila's public humiliation now looked small and fragile, dwarfed by the magnitude of her miscalculation. Diego stepped forward, his resemblance to Jonathan even more striking in the room's intimate lighting. "For 28 years, I've wondered what kind of man my father was. What kind of family I might have belonged to. Tonight, I finally got my answer." Jonathan's voice was barely a whisper. "I had a brother this whole time." "You have a brother," Diego corrected gently. "The question is whether you want to acknowledge that relationship or continue your mother's pattern of abandonment." The words hit Jonathan like a physical blow. He looked between Diego and Patricia, seeing his own features reflected in his half-brother's face, understanding finally dawning about the depth of his mother's deception. "You knew," Jonathan said to Patricia, his voice growing stronger. "All these years, you knew I had a brother, and you said nothing." Patricia's hands trembled in her lap. "I was protecting our family, protecting your father's reputation, protecting you from complications you didn't need." "You were protecting yourself," Elena interjected coldly. Just like you tried to protect yourself tonight by attacking Camila. But some actions have consequences you can't control. Marcus Chen, who had been silent since the helicopters arrived, finally found his voice. Mrs. Rodriguez, I owe your daughter an apology. The investigation I conducted. I made assumptions based on incomplete information. Elena's gaze fixed on him like a laser. Mr. Chen, isn't it? Chief Financial Officer of Whitman Technologies. Your company reported $47 million in revenue last year. Marcus nodded, confused by the seeming non sequitur. Rodriguez Holdings generated more revenue than that in the past 3 weeks. Elena continued smoothly. My daughter personally oversees investments worth more than your company's total market valuation. When you hired investigators to spy on her, you weren't protecting your friend. You were demonstrating exactly the kind of small-minded thinking that led to tonight's debacle. Tom Bradley cleared his throat nervously. Mrs. Rodriguez, we were only concerned for Jonathan's welfare. Were you? Elena's eyebrow arched dangerously. Or were you concerned about maintaining a social order where wealthy white men like yourselves don't have to compete with successful women of color? The accusation landed like a bomb in the elegant living room. Dr. Stevens, Jennifer Walsh, and the other business associates shifted uncomfortably, forced to confront the ugly implications of their behavior. That's not fair, Jennifer protested weakly. We didn't know. Exactly, Camila spoke for the first time since her mother's arrival. You didn't know, but you assumed. You assumed I was after Jonathan's money because you couldn't imagine that a brown woman might have her own wealth. You assumed I was lying about my background because you couldn't conceive that someone like me might belong in your world legitimately. Crystal, who had been silent throughout the revelations, suddenly burst into tears. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. Patricia paid me to come here tonight. She said you were using Jonathan, that you were going to hurt him. I thought I was helping. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Patricia's face went completely white as she realized her co-conspirator had just destroyed any remaining plausible deniability. You paid her. Jonathan's voice was deadly quiet. You orchestrated this entire humiliation? I was trying to save you, Patricia said desperately. You have to understand, I've seen women like her before. They target successful men, they. Women like her? Diego's voice cut through his birth mother's words like a blade. You mean women like our mother? Women who dare to exist in spaces you think belong only to people who look like you. Elena moved to stand beside her son, their united presence creating an imposing wall of righteous fury. Patricia, you've spent 28 years running from the consequences of your choices. Tonight, those consequences have finally caught up with you. Outside, the wedding reception had transformed into something resembling a corporate event. Camila could see through the windows that her mother's security team had discreetly taken control of the situation, ensuring that guests remained calm while additional personnel established a wider perimeter around the estate. There's something else you should know, Elena said, pulling out her phone again. Patricia, you've been quite active in certain social circles, haven't you? The Napa Valley Country Club, the San Francisco Symphony Board, the Pacific Heights Social Registry. Patricia nodded weakly, confusion mixing with dread on her face. All organizations that depend heavily on charitable donations, Elena continued. The Rodriguez Foundation has been one of their largest supporters for the past 5 years. Anonymously, of course. We prefer our philanthropy to speak for itself rather than buying social status. The implication was clear. With a few phone calls, Elena could destroy Patricia's entire social existence, cut off funding to every organization that gave her life meaning and status. You wouldn't, Patricia breathed. I haven't decided yet, Elena replied with chilling calm. That depends largely on how this evening concludes. Jonathan suddenly stood up, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Stop. All of you just stop. This isn't helping anything. He turned to face Camila, his brown eyes filled with pain and confusion. I need to understand something. When you said you loved me, when we planned this wedding, when we talked about our future together, was any of that real? Or was I just some interesting project for a bored heiress? The question cut Camila deeper than any of Patricia's insults. How can you ask me that? Because I don't know anything about you, Jonathan shot back. 3 years, Camila. 3 years of thinking I was marrying a file clerk who struggled to pay rent. 3 years of insisting on paying for dinner because I thought you couldn't afford it. 3 years of you letting me believe I was taking care of you when apparently you could buy and sell my entire company without blinking. Tears burned behind Camila's eyes. I let you take care of me because I wanted to feel normal. Do you have any idea what it's like to never know if someone loves you or loves your money? To wonder if every relationship is just another business transaction. So you decided to find out by lying to me for 3 years? Diego stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. Jonathan, I understand your anger, but consider this. Camila gave up every advantage her wealth could provide to be with you. She lived in a modest apartment, drove an ordinary car, worked a regular job. Also, she could experience what normal love felt like. That's not the behavior of someone using you. It's the behavior of someone who didn't trust me, Jonathan replied bitterly. Elena's voice cut through their argument like steel. Trust. You want to talk about trust? Your mother spent months plotting to destroy my daughter's marriage. She hired your ex-girlfriend to create drama at your wedding. She convinced your friends to spy on your wife. She publicly humiliated Camila in front of 200 people. And you're upset because Camila kept her financial status private. The living room fell silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Through the windows, they could see wedding guests slowly returning to their tables, though the atmosphere outside had clearly shifted from celebration to curious observation. Camila wiped her eyes, smearing her carefully applied makeup. I was going to tell you after the honeymoon. I had it all planned out. We were going to go to my family's house in Phoenix, meet my parents properly, see the business. I wanted you to understand gradually, not have it thrown at you like this. Your parents, Jonathan said slowly. The factory workers. Who built an empire, Elena interjected proudly. My husband started with one oil well in West Texas and turned it into the largest privately held energy company in North America. I started as his translator and became his equal partner in every sense. We worked 18-hour days for 20 years to build something that would last generations. She gestured toward Camila. Our daughter earned her place in that empire. She didn't inherit her position. She proved herself worthy of it. Every decision she's made, every deal she's negotiated, every success she's achieved has been based on merit, not privilege. Marcus looked up from his phone, his face pale. John, I've been getting texts from colleagues. Word is spreading about tonight. The financial networks are calling it the wedding revelation of the decade. Rodriguez Holdings stock is trending on social media. We're not publicly traded, Elena said mildly. But I appreciate the interest. Tom Bradley laughed shakily. Of course you're not. Why would you need public investors when you probably have more cash on hand than most corporations? Diego moved to sit across from Jonathan, his posture open and non-threatening. Brother, I know this is overwhelming. When I first learned about my real parentage, I was angry for months. Angry at our mother for abandoning me, angry at Elena for lying about my father being dead, angry at a world that seemed designed to keep families apart. Jonathan's attention focused on his half-brother. How did you get past it? I realized that anger was just fear in disguise, Diego replied. Fear of being hurt again, fear of trusting people who had already lied to me, fear of opening myself up to more disappointment. But I also realized that staying angry meant staying alone. He glanced at Camila, then back at Jonathan. Your wife made a choice to live modestly so she could love you freely. That's not deception. That's sacrifice. She gave up the comfort and security her wealth provides to see if you could love her for who she is rather than what she owns. But she never gave me the choice, Jonathan said, though his voice had lost some of its edge. Because she was protecting both of you, Elena said gently. Extreme wealth changes everything. Jonathan. Every conversation, every relationship, every decision gets filtered through financial implications. She wanted to know you loved her before that pressure entered your relationship. Crystal, who had been quietly sobbing in the corner, suddenly stood up. I need to leave. I need to get out of here before I make this worse. Sit down, Crystal, Elena commanded, her voice brooking no argument. You're not going anywhere until we've addressed your part in tonight's events. Crystal sank back onto the sofa, her face streaked with mascara and regret. You took money to disrupt my daughter's wedding, Elena continued. You agreed to hurt two people who never wronged you, all for a paycheck from a bitter woman who couldn't accept that her son had chosen happiness over her prejudices. I needed the money, Crystal whispered. My modeling career is over. I'm behind on rent. Patricia offered me $50,000 to create a scene that would expose Camila's true nature. $50,000, Elena repeated thoughtfully. An interesting amount. The same amount Patricia paid me 28 years ago to disappear from her life. The parallel wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Patricia's pattern of using money to solve problems, to buy silence, to manipulate situations to her advantage. Jonathan suddenly laughed, though there was no humor in the sound. So let me understand this correctly. My mother, who accused my wife of being a gold digger, paid my ex-girlfriend $50,000 to disrupt my wedding. The irony is incredible. The irony, Elena said quietly, is that your mother did exactly what she accused Camila of doing. She used money to manipulate people and situations for personal gain. Camila reached for Jonathan's hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he let her take it. I know I hurt you by keeping secrets. I know the way you found out was horrible. But please believe me when I say that every feeling I've shared with you has been real. The money doesn't change how I feel about you. Jonathan squeezed her fingers gently. It changes everything else, though. It changes our entire future. Only if you let it, Diego said quietly. Elena taught me that wealth is a tool, not an identity. It can be used to help people, to build things, to create opportunities. Or it can be used to hurt people, to control them, to isolate yourself from real connections. He looked at Camila with obvious affection. Your wife chose to use her wealth to protect your relationship rather than to impress you. That tells you everything you need to know about her character. Outside, the reception music had resumed, though the energy was clearly different. Guests were probably discussing the evening's revelations, processing the fact that they'd just witnessed the intersection of extreme wealth and family drama on a scale most people only read about in magazines. Elena checked her watch, a simple Rolex that probably cost more than most cars. It's getting late, and we still have some family business to discuss. Patricia, you and I need to have a private conversation about the future. Patricia's face went even paler, if that was possible. What kind of future? The kind where you learn to treat my daughter with respect, Elena replied. The kind where you acknowledge your son Diego as part of your family. The kind where you understand that your days of manipulation and control are over. She gestured toward the windows where the convoy of vehicles waited. I brought enough resources tonight to solve problems permanently, Patricia. The question is whether we solve them amicably or whether we solve them my way. Elena's ultimatum hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Patricia sat frozen in her chair, the full weight of her situation finally settling on her shoulders. The woman who had controlled every aspect of tonight's confrontation now found herself completely powerless, facing consequences she had never imagined possible. What exactly are you proposing? Patricia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Elena could respond, Jonathan's phone erupted with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media alerts, all cascading in a digital avalanche that made him stare at the device in horror. It's everywhere, he said, his voice hollow. The helicopters, the cars, everything. Someone posted video of your mother arriving. It's already got 500,000 views. Marcus pulled out his own phone, his face growing pale as he scrolled through the notifications. John, this is bad. Really bad. The business press has picked it up. Tech entrepreneur's secret wedding to oil heiress exposed. Hidden billions revealed at Napa Valley wedding drama. Jennifer Walsh looked up from her phone with dawning horror. The video of Patricia calling Camila a gold digger is trending on Twitter. People are sharing it with captions like, When you insult someone worth more than your entire bloodline. Crystal burst into fresh tears. My face is all over social media. Everyone's calling me the psycho ex-girlfriend who got paid to disrupt a billionaire's wedding. My life is ruined. Elena's expression remained perfectly composed. Perhaps you should have considered the consequences before accepting money to humiliate my daughter. Camila watched the chaos unfolding around her with a growing sense of dread. This was exactly what she had feared, exactly why she had kept her identity secret for so long. The media circus, the public scrutiny, the transformation of their private life into entertainment for strangers. Make it stop, Jonathan said suddenly, his voice rising. Whatever influence you have, whatever power, make this stop. I can't, Elena replied simply. The video is already viral. The story has already spread beyond my ability to contain it. This is the reality of our world, Jonathan. Everything we do becomes public eventually. Jonathan's face was flushed with anger and humiliation. So this is what I married into? A life where every private moment becomes a public spectacle? Where every family argument gets dissected by strangers on the internet? You married into a family that has resources to protect what matters, Elena corrected. But those resources come with visibility that can't be avoided indefinitely. Diego placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder. Brother, I understand the shock. When I first learned about our family's wealth, I felt like my entire life had been a lie. But you have choices now that you didn't have before. What choices? Jonathan laughed bitterly. The choice to live in a fishbowl? The choice to wonder if every person I meet wants something for my wife's money? The choice to become a tabloid curiosity. Camila reached for his hand again, but this time he pulled away. The rejection hit her like a physical blow. Jonathan, she said softly, I know this is overwhelming, but we can work through this together. Can we? His brown eyes were filled with pain and betrayal. Because right now I'm looking at a woman I thought I knew, and I realize I don't know anything about her at all. The words shattered something inside Camila's chest. That's not true. You know everything that matters about me. Do I? Jonathan's voice was getting louder, his composure finally cracking completely. I know you pretended to be poor while you're actually richer than God. I know you let me pay for dinners while you could have bought the entire restaurant. I know you've been living a lie for 3 years while I planned a future based on complete fiction. It wasn't fiction, Camila protested, tears streaming down her face. My feelings for you, our relationship, our love. None of that was fake. But everything else was, Jonathan shot back. Your job, your apartment, your entire life story. How am I supposed to trust anything you've told me when the foundation of our relationship is built on lies? Elena's voice cut through their argument like a knife. That's enough. Both of you. But Jonathan was beyond listening to reason. 3 years of suppressed doubts, fed by his mother's constant criticism and now magnified by the revelation of Camila's deception, came pouring out in a torrent of pain and rage. You want to know what the worst part is, he continued, his voice cracking. It's not the money. It's not even the lies. It's that you didn't trust me. After 3 years together, after promising to marry me, after all the conversations about building a life together, you still didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. I was protecting you, Camila said desperately. You were protecting yourself, Jonathan replied, throwing her earlier words back at her. You were protecting yourself from the possibility that I might love you differently if I knew the truth. You were protecting yourself from having to find out if our relationship could survive reality. The accusation hit home because it contained a grain of truth. Camila had been protecting herself, terrified that revealing her wealth would change everything between them. But she had also genuinely believed she was protecting Jonathan from the complications her life would bring. So what happens now? She asked, her voice broken. Where do we go from here? Jonathan looked around the living room at his mother, his newly discovered half-brother, the business associates who had investigated his wife, and the woman he had married that morning who turned out to be one of the wealthiest people in America. I don't know, he said finally. I honestly don't know if there is a we anymore. The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock that spread throughout the room. Patricia's face lit up with the first genuine smile she'd worn all evening. Crystal stopped crying, sensing an opportunity in Jonathan's emotional breakdown. Even the business associates looked uncomfortable with the raw pain on display. But Elena's expression was thunderous. "Jonathan Whitman, you are about to make the biggest mistake of your life." "Am I?" Jonathan turned to face his mother-in-law with something approaching defiance. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I already made it 3 years ago when I fell in love with someone who didn't trust me enough to tell me who she really was." "You fell in love with exactly who she is," Elena replied fiercely. "The woman who chose to live modestly rather than use her wealth to impress you. The woman who wanted to be loved for her character rather than her bank account. The woman who sacrificed her comfort and security to give you both the gift of knowing your love was real. The woman who lied to me every single day for 3 years, Jonathan countered. Diego stepped forward, his voice calm but urgent. "Jonathan, don't do this. Don't let hurt pride destroy something real. I've spent my entire adult life watching our mother build walls around her heart to protect herself from being hurt again. Don't make the same mistake." "This isn't about pride," Jonathan said, though his voice suggested otherwise. "This is about fundamental trust. How can I build a marriage with someone who's been lying to me since the day we met?" Camila stood up suddenly, her emerald dress rustling around her knees. Her makeup was ruined, her hair disheveled, but her spine was straight and her voice was steady when she spoke. "You're right," she said quietly. "I lied to you. I lied about my job, my apartment, my background. I lied because I was scared, because I've seen what money does to relationships, because I wanted something real in a world where everything feels transactional." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheekbones. "But I never lied about loving you. I never lied about wanting to spend my life with you. I never lied about believing you were the best man I'd ever met." Jonathan's expression softened slightly, but the pain in his eyes remained. "That's not enough anymore, Camila. Love isn't enough when it's built on deception." "Then what do you want from me?" she asked, her voice breaking completely. "What would be enough? Do you want me to give away my money? Pretend it doesn't exist? Live in poverty to prove my love is real?" "I want you to have trusted me," Jonathan replied. "I want you to have believed that I could handle the truth. I want you to have given me the choice instead of making it for me." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the reception continued, though the energy had clearly shifted from celebration to curiosity as guests processed the evening's revelations. The helicopters remained on the lawn like sleeping giants, the convoy of luxury cars a constant reminder of the wealth and power that had just invaded their normal world. Patricia finally found her voice, sensing her opportunity. "Jonathan, darling, it's not too late. Marriages can be annulled. This mistake can be corrected." Elena's head snapped toward Patricia like a predator spotting prey. "If you say another word, I will destroy you so completely that your own shadow will refuse to acknowledge you." But the damage was done. The word annulment hung in the air like poison gas, giving shape to thoughts that Jonathan hadn't yet been willing to voice. "Maybe she's right," he said quietly. "Maybe this whole thing was a mistake from the beginning." Camila's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the back of a chair for support, staring at her husband with dawning horror. "You can't mean that." "Can't I?" Jonathan's voice was hollow. "Look around, Camila. Look at what your world has done to our wedding day. Look at the media circus outside. Look at how everything changed the moment your family arrived. Is this what you want our life to be like?" "This is one night," Camila said desperately. "One terrible night that we can get through together. Is it? Or is this just the beginning? Because I'm looking at helicopter squadrons and armed security and social media explosions, and I'm thinking this is exactly what the rest of our marriage would look like." Marcus cleared his throat nervously. "John, maybe you should take some time to think about this. Don't make any permanent decisions while you're emotional." "I'm not emotional," Jonathan replied, though his voice suggested the opposite. "I'm thinking clearly for the first time in 3 years. I'm seeing the situation without the romantic filters that kept me from asking the right questions. Crystal perked up from her corner, sensing opportunity. Jonathan, you know I still love you. You know we could have had something real together, something honest, something without all these complications. Elena's voice was deadly quiet. Miss Morrison, if you speak again, I will ensure that you never work in any industry, anywhere, for the rest of your natural life. But Crystal's words had already hit their target. Jonathan looked at his ex-girlfriend, remembering a simpler time when relationships were uncomplicated by billion-dollar fortunes and corporate empires. At least Crystal was honest about who she was, he said, the words designed to wound. They succeeded. Camilla's face went completely white, and she stepped back as if he had struck her. Jonathan, she whispered, you're going to regret this. When you calm down, when you think clearly, you're going to realize what you're throwing away. What I'm throwing away. His laugh was bitter. Camilla, I'm throwing away a relationship built on lies. I'm escaping before I get buried so deep in your world that I forget who I really am. Elena stood up slowly, her presence filling the room with barely contained fury. Mr. Whitman, you are making a choice that will haunt you for the rest of your life. My daughter offered you everything she had to give, and you're rejecting it because your pride can't handle the fact that she's more successful than you. This isn't about success, Jonathan protested. Isn't it? Elena's smile was sharp as a blade. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a fragile male ego that can't handle being married to a woman who doesn't need him financially. The accusation hit Jonathan like a slap. His face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? Diego asked quietly. Because right now, you're destroying something beautiful because it came with complications you didn't expect. Jonathan looked around the room one more time, taking in the faces staring at him with mixtures of disappointment, anger, and pity. His mother sat in her chair with barely concealed triumph. His half-brother watched him with sad understanding. His business associates looked uncomfortable to be witnessing such intimate pain. And his wife, the woman he had married 8 hours earlier, stood alone in the center of it all with tears streaming down her face. I need time, he said finally. I need space to think about all of this without helicopters and armed guards and media attention. I need to figure out who I am in a world where my wife can buy and sell everything I've ever worked for. Time for what? Camilla asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. Jonathan met her eyes for the first time since the revelations began. Time to decide if this marriage was the biggest mistake of my life. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Camilla's face crumpled, and she turned away, unable to look at him anymore. Outside, the first news van was pulling up to the estate's main gate. The news van's headlights swept across the estate's entrance like searchlights, followed by 2 more media vehicles racing up the winding road. Through the living room windows, everyone could see photographers with telephoto lenses setting up positions along the property's perimeter, their camera flashes creating an intermittent strobe effect against the night sky. They're like vultures, Jennifer Walsh muttered, pressing closer to the window. How did they get here so fast? Social media, Marcus replied grimly, his phone still buzzing with notifications. The video of tonight's confrontation has 8 million views and counting. Every major news outlet is picking up the story. Elena's security team moved with practiced efficiency, establishing a wider perimeter around the main house while keeping the media at bay. The helicopters remained on the lawn, their presence a stark reminder that this was no ordinary family dispute. Jonathan stood frozen in the center of the room, his words about the marriage being a mistake still echoing in the silence. Camilla had turned away from him completely, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. Well, Patricia said, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction, I suppose the truth has a way of revealing itself eventually. The truth. Diego's voice was sharp with anger. The truth is that you manipulated tonight's events to destroy your son's happiness because your racism couldn't tolerate him loving a successful woman of color. Patricia's face flushed. That's not what this is about. Isn't it? Elena's voice cut through the room like a blade. Because everything you've done tonight, from hiring Crystal to orchestrating this public humiliation, has been designed to drive my daughter away. You saw a brown woman in your precious white family, and you couldn't stomach it. Jonathan's phone rang suddenly, the sound jarring in the tense atmosphere. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. It's my father. The room fell silent. Even Patricia seemed to shrink into her chair at the mention of her husband. Answer it, Elena said quietly. He deserves to know what's happening. Jonathan hesitated, then swiped to accept the call. Dad! His father's voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Jonathan, what the hell is going on? I'm seeing videos of helicopters at your wedding, news reports about oil heiresses, and social media posts claiming your mother attacked your wife. Please tell me this is some kind of elaborate joke. Jonathan looked at his mother, then at Elena, then at the woman he'd married that morning who was now standing alone by the window, her emerald dress a stark contrast against the darkness outside. It's not a joke, Dad. It's complicated. Complicated. Son, I'm watching CNN right now, and they're calling it the wedding scandal of the decade. Your mother-in-law apparently controls more oil than some Middle Eastern countries, and your wife has been living undercover as a file clerk for 3 years. How is that complicated? Patricia's face had gone ashen. She had never told her husband about Elena, about Diego, about any of the choices she'd made 28 years ago. Now all of it was about to come crashing down on her marriage as well. Dad, Jonathan said slowly, there are some things about Mom that you need to know. Things that happened before I was born. What kind of things? Jonathan looked at Diego, then at Elena. Things about affairs, and children, and lies that have been kept for almost 3 decades. The silence on the phone was deafening. When Jonathan's father spoke again, his voice was barely controlled. Put your mother on the phone. Now. Patricia shook her head frantically, but Jonathan was already holding out the device. Mom, Dad wants to talk to you. I can't, Patricia whispered. Not now. Not like this. Patricia Eleanor Whitman, their father's voice boomed through the speaker. You will take this phone right now, or I will drive up there and we will have this conversation in front of every news camera in California. With trembling hands, Patricia accepted the phone. Hello, Henry. Is it true? Do I have a son I've never met? Patricia's voice cracked. Henry, I can explain. Do I have a son I've never met? He repeated, his voice rising. Patricia's gaze found Diego across the room. Her abandoned child stood tall and proud, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, his success and dignity a living rebuke to her decades-old choice. Yes, she whispered. The silence stretched so long that everyone wondered if the call had dropped. When Henry Whitman finally spoke, his voice was ice-cold. 28 years, Patricia. 28 years you've let me believe I only had one child. 28 years you've let a son of mine grow up thinking his father didn't want him. I was protecting our family. You were protecting yourself, Henry cut her off. And in the process, you've destroyed everything. Our marriage, our family, our son's wedding day. Everything. Through the phone speaker, they could hear him taking deep breaths, trying to control his rage. I'm flying up there tonight. We're going to fix this mess, and then we're going to have a very long conversation about the future of our marriage. The line went dead. Patricia stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake, then slowly handed it back to Jonathan. 28 years of lies, Elena said quietly. 28 years of letting Diego believe his father was dead rather than admitting you were a coward who chose social status over maternal love. Crystal, who had been silent throughout the phone call, suddenly stood up. I need to leave. This is too much. This whole night has been too much. Sit down, Elena commanded. You took money to participate in this disaster. You'll stay until it's resolved. But the media outside will be the least of your problems if you try to leave before we're finished. Crystal sank back onto the sofa, her earlier bravado completely evaporated. Marcus checked his phone again, his face growing more worried by the minute. John, the business ramifications are starting to hit. 3 of our potential investors are calling emergency meetings. The board wants answers. If this keeps escalating, If what keeps escalating? Jonathan asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. If you divorcing an oil heiress becomes a public spectacle, it could destroy the company's reputation. Investors don't like instability, especially the kind that plays out on social media. The weight of consequences was settling on Jonathan's shoulders like a lead blanket. It wasn't just his personal life at stake anymore. His business, his employees, his professional reputation, everything he'd built independently of his family's money was now in jeopardy because of decisions made in anger and pain. Camila finally turned from the window, her face streaked with tears but her voice steady. I can make this go away. Everyone looked at her. The media attention, the business complications, all of it. One phone call from my mother, and this story disappears from the news cycle. Different stories suddenly become more interesting. The reporters outside suddenly get called away to cover other events. Elena nodded. It's true. We have significant influence over media narratives when necessary. Why would you do that? Jonathan asked. Why would you help me after what I said? Camila's smile was heartbreaking. Because I love you. Because even if you don't want to be married to me anymore, I don't want to see your life destroyed because of who I am. The generosity of the offer hit Jonathan like a physical blow. Here was the woman he'd just rejected, offering to use her family's power to protect him from the consequences of his own emotional breakdown. There's a catch, though, Elena said quietly. If we clean this up, if we make it disappear, we do it our way. Which means acknowledging Diego as part of the Whitman family. Which means Patricia facing consequences for her choices. Which means the truth about everything comes out, just privately instead of publicly. Jonathan looked around the room, taking inventory of the wreckage his wedding day had become. His mother sat defeated in her chair, her decades of secrets finally exposed. His half-brother watched him with patient hope, waiting to see if he would be accepted or rejected again. His business associates looked uncomfortable to be witnessing such intimate family destruction. And his wife stood alone, offering to sacrifice her family's privacy to protect his reputation. Why? He asked Camila quietly. Why would you save me from this when I just told you our marriage was a mistake? Because love isn't conditional, she replied. I didn't fall in love with you because you were perfect. I fell in love with you because you were kind, because you were smart, because you made me laugh, because you saw me as a person rather than a bank account. Those things don't change just because you're hurt and confused. Diego stepped forward. Jonathan, I know what it's like to have your entire world restructured in a single evening. When I learned the truth about my parentage, I was angry for months. Angry at Elena for lying about my father being dead, angry at Patricia for abandoning me, angry at circumstances beyond my control. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But eventually, I realized that anger was just fear wearing a disguise. Fear of being hurt again, fear of trusting people who had already disappointed me, fear of opening myself to more pain. How did you get past it? Jonathan asked. I decided that staying angry meant staying alone, Diego replied. And I realized that the people who had hurt me weren't the same as the people offering to love me moving forward. Outside, more news vans were arriving. The media circus was growing larger by the minute, transforming what should have been a private family crisis into public entertainment. Jennifer Walsh looked up from her phone with alarm. The story is spreading internationally. BBC, Reuters, Al Jazeera. This isn't just American news anymore. Elena's expression remained calm. That can be managed if we act quickly. What would you need from me? Jonathan asked quietly. A decision, Elena replied. Not about your marriage, not about your relationship with Camila. Those are between the two of you. But a decision about whether you want to be part of a family that includes Diego, that acknowledges the truth about Patricia's choices, that operates with honesty moving forward. Patricia found her voice for the first time since the phone call with her husband. And if Jonathan says no, if he chooses to walk away from all of this, Elena's smile was sharp. Then you'll face the consequences of your choices alone. The media circus continues, the family secrets become public entertainment, and Diego makes his own decisions about how to handle 28 years of abandonment. The weight of the choice settled on Jonathan's shoulders. He could walk away, divorce Camila, try to rebuild his life away from the Rodriguez Empire's influence. But doing so would mean abandoning Diego again, leaving his half-brother to face Patricia's rejection twice in one lifetime. It would mean allowing his mother to escape accountability for decades of manipulation and lies. And it would mean losing the woman he loved because his pride couldn't handle the complexities her wealth brought to their relationship. Or he could choose family, choose truth, choose the difficult work of building something real from the ashes of tonight's revelations. He looked at Camila, standing alone by the window in her emerald dress, offering to protect him even though he'd just broken her heart. He looked at Diego, waiting patiently to learn if he would gain a brother or lose a family twice in one lifetime. He looked at his mother, finally facing consequences for choices made in fear and prejudice 28 years ago. "I need to ask you something," he said to Camila. "And I need you to tell me the truth." She nodded. "If we work through this, if we stay married, will you trust me enough to share your real life with me? The businesses, the responsibilities, the security details, all of it? Or will you keep trying to protect me from who you really are?" Camila's voice was barely a whisper. "If you can accept it, yes. I'll share everything. Even if it's complicated, even if it changes everything about how we live. Even then." Jonathan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision that would define the rest of his life. Jonathan stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by the wreckage of his wedding day and the weight of a decision that would define the rest of his life. Outside, the media circus continued to grow, but inside, everything had crystallized into this single moment of choice. He looked at Camila, her emerald dress wrinkled from the emotional turmoil, her makeup streaked with tears, but her chin lifted with the dignity that had first attracted him 3 years ago. Then he turned to Diego, his half-brother who had waited 28 years for acknowledgement from a family that had abandoned him. Finally, his gaze settled on Patricia, whose decades of manipulation and prejudice had led them all to this crossroads. "I've made my decision," Jonathan said quietly. The room held its collective breath. "Mom," he began, his voice steady but firm, "what you did tonight was unforgivable. Not just to Camila, but to Diego, to Dad, to me. You orchestrated a public humiliation of my wife based on racism and prejudice. You paid my ex-girlfriend to disrupt my wedding. You've spent 28 years lying about having another son." Patricia's face crumpled. "Jonathan, please." "I'm not finished," he continued. "You've spent 3 years trying to sabotage my relationship because you couldn't accept that I fell in love with someone who didn't meet your narrow definition of acceptable. You've poisoned every family gathering, every holiday, every moment of happiness with your constant criticism and manipulation." He paused, gathering strength for what came next. "As of tonight, you are no longer welcome in my life until you make this right. All of it." Patricia gasped as if he'd struck her. "You can't mean that." "I absolutely mean that. You will publicly apologize to Camila. You will acknowledge Diego as your son and my brother. You will face whatever consequences Dad decides for lying to him for 3 decades. And you will get therapy to address the racism and control issues that led to tonight's disaster." Elena's expression showed approval, but she remained silent, letting Jonathan handle his family dynamics. "And Camila," Jonathan turned to his wife, his voice softening, "I owe you an apology too. Not for being hurt about the secrets, but for how I handled that hurt. For saying our marriage was a mistake. For letting pride and shock override 3 years of love and trust." Camila's breath caught, hope flickering in her dark eyes. "I was overwhelmed," Jonathan continued. "Terrified, actually. Terrified of losing myself in your world. Terrified of becoming someone I didn't recognize. Terrified that everything I thought I knew about us was built on lies." He moved closer to her, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But standing here, watching you offer to protect me even after I hurt you, seeing you face down my mother's attacks with such grace, watching you put my well-being above your own, I realize I was wrong. You didn't lie about who you are. You just kept some parts of your life private until you felt safe enough to share them." Camila's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were different. These carried hope. "I want to try again," Jonathan said, reaching for her hands. I want to learn about your real life, your business, your responsibilities. I want to meet the challenge of being married to someone extraordinary instead of running away from it." "Are you sure?" Camila asked, her voice trembling. "Because this won't be easy. The media attention, the security requirements, the constant scrutiny. Everything changes now." "Then we'll change together," Jonathan replied firmly. "We'll figure it out as we go, but we'll do it together. As husband and wife. As partners in everything." Diego stepped forward, his face bright with emotion. "Does this mean?" "It means you're my brother," Jonathan said, turning to embrace Diego for the first time. "It means I'm sorry it took me 28 years to find you, and I'm sorry our mother abandoned you, but if you're willing, I'd like to make up for lost time." The two men embraced, and the resemblance between them was unmistakable. Same height, same build, same way of holding themselves. Patricia watched from her chair with something approaching devastation as she realized she was witnessing the family connection she had tried to prevent for nearly 3 decades. "What about the media situation?" Marcus asked quietly. "The business implications?" Elena smiled, pulling out her phone. "Consider it handled." She typed rapidly, then made a quick call. "Yes, it's Elena. Execute the media redirect protocol. I want every major outlet focused on the Senator Morrison scandal by morning. And make sure tonight's videos disappear from social platforms within the hour." Even as she spoke, phones around the room began pinging with notifications about a breaking political scandal that suddenly made a wedding drama seem trivial by comparison. "How did you?" Jennifer Walsh started to ask, then shook her head. "Never mind. I don't want to know. The Rodriguez family has been managing media narratives for decades," Elena explained calmly. "It's a necessary skill when you control significant portions of the economy." Crystal, who had been silent throughout Jonathan's decision, suddenly spoke up. "What about me? What happens to me now?" Elena's gaze fixed on her like a laser. "You took money to disrupt my daughter's wedding. You caused emotional trauma to 2 people who had never wronged you. What do you think should happen to you?" Crystal's face went white. "I needed the money. I'm behind on everything. My career is over." "Your career was over before tonight," Elena replied coldly. "But your integrity didn't have to be. You chose to participate in Patricia's scheme for money. That choice has consequences." She pulled out her phone again, scrolling through contacts. "However, I'm not entirely without mercy. I know someone who runs a rehabilitation center for people struggling with addiction and financial problems. They're always looking for people willing to share their stories about the consequences of poor choices." Crystal's eyes widened. "You mean like speaking to groups? About what happened tonight?" "About how desperation led you to make choices that hurt innocent people," Elena corrected. "About how accepting money to manipulate and lie ultimately made your problems worse, not better. If you're genuinely committed to making amends, there's a path forward. If you're just looking for another easy solution, then you're on your own." Crystal nodded frantically. "Yes, I'll do it. I'll speak to groups, share my story, whatever it takes." Elena handed her a business card. "Call this number tomorrow. They'll explain the program." Tom Bradley cleared his throat nervously. "What about us? The investigation, the assumptions we made." "You did what you thought was right based on incomplete information," Camila said graciously. "I don't hold that against you. But going forward, if you have concerns about Jonathan's well-being, maybe talk to him directly instead of hiring private investigators." Dr. Stevens stepped forward, looking embarrassed. "Mrs. Whitman, I owe you a personal apology. I allowed Patricia's concerns to override my better judgment. A physician should know better than to diagnose a situation without examining all the evidence." "Apology accepted," Camila replied. "All of you have been Jonathan's friends and supporters for years. I hope we can build new relationships based on honesty moving forward." Patricia finally found her voice, though it came out broken and small. "What about me? What about my marriage?" Elena's expression hardened. That's between you and Henry. But I will say this. You've spent 28 years living a lie, letting your husband believe he only had one child, allowing your son Diego to grow up thinking his father was dead. The damage you've caused to this family is immeasurable. But it can be repaired, Diego interjected quietly. If you're willing to do the work. If you're willing to acknowledge what you've done and commit to change. Patricia looked at her abandoned son, seeing his success, his dignity, his willingness to offer grace even after decades of rejection. I don't know if I can. I don't know how to undo 28 years of choices. You start with the truth, Elena said firmly. You tell Henry everything. You acknowledge Diego publicly as your son. You get professional help to address the racism and control issues that led to tonight. And you apologize, genuinely and publicly, to everyone you've hurt. And if I do all that, then maybe, eventually, you can earn back some measure of trust, Jonathan said. But Mom, understand this. The days of you manipulating and controlling this family are over. The days of your racism being tolerated are over. You either choose to change, or you choose to be alone. Patricia nodded slowly, the weight of her choices finally settling on her shoulders. Outside, the media circus was already beginning to disperse as news of the political scandal Elena had orchestrated began to break. The helicopters remained on the lawn, but their presence now seemed protective rather than invasive. So what happens now? Jonathan asked, looking around the room at this strange new family constellation. Now we go home, Elena said, standing gracefully. Camila, Diego, you're both coming to Phoenix next weekend. It's time Jonathan met his real in-laws and learned about the business he's married into. And Dad? Jonathan asked. We'll be here in 3 hours, Elena replied, checking her watch. I suggest you use that time to prepare him for meeting his other son. Diego moved to stand beside Jonathan and Camila, the three of them forming a united front for the first time. I have 28 years of stories to share, he said to Jonathan. And I'd like to hear about yours. I'd like that too, Jonathan replied, feeling something settle in his chest. Family. Real family. Complicated and messy and imperfect, but real. Camila slipped her hand into Jonathan's, their wedding rings catching the light. Are you ready for this? Really ready. Because once you meet my parents, once you see the full scope of the business, once you understand what our life together will actually look like, there's no going back to simple. Jonathan lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Elena smiled, the first genuine warmth she'd shown all evening. Welcome to the family, Jonathan. I think you're going to fit in perfectly. Outside, the last news van was pulling away, chasing after the bigger story Elena had provided. The helicopters powered down for the night, and the convoy of luxury cars prepared for departure. The estate staff began cleaning up the reception area, removing evidence of the most dramatic wedding Napa Valley had ever seen. But inside the main house, a new family was taking shape. A family built on truth instead of lies, acceptance instead of prejudice, love instead of control. Patricia sat alone in her chair, contemplating the wreckage of her choices and the long road to redemption that stretched ahead of her. Crystal clutched the business card Elena had given her, a lifeline toward making amends for her mistakes. And in the center of it all, Jonathan and Camila stood together, their marriage tested by fire and emerging stronger than ever. I love you, Mrs. Whitman, Jonathan whispered. I love you too, Mr. Whitman, Camila replied. All of you. The man who fell in love with a file clerk, and the man who's brave enough to be married to an oil heiress. As midnight approached, marking the end of their wedding day, they weren't the same people who had exchanged vows that morning. They were something better, something stronger, something real. And for the first time in 3 years, there were no secrets between them. 6 months later, the Arizona sun blazed overhead as Jonathan adjusted his tie, standing on the terrace of the Rodriguez family compound. The sprawling estate stretched across 200 acres of desert landscape, with the main house alone covering 40,000 square feet. 6 months ago, he would have been intimidated by such opulence. Today, it simply felt like visiting family. Nervous? Camila asked, appearing beside him in a flowing coral sundress that complemented her glowing skin. Marriage had been good to her. The stress lines that had appeared during their wedding night drama had faded, replaced by a contentment that came from finally living authentically. "A little," Jonathan admitted, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as staff prepared the great room for the afternoon's gathering. "It's not every day you host your first board meeting as a Rodriguez Holdings advisor." Camila smiled, slipping her hand into his. The simple gold band on her finger caught the sunlight, a reminder of vows renewed not in ceremony but in daily choice. "You'll be brilliant. You always are." Through the windows, they could see the other attendees arriving for what had become a monthly family tradition, combining business meetings with family dinners, ensuring that the next generation understood both the empire they would inherit and the relationships that mattered most. Diego emerged from the main house, looking comfortable in his role as Rodriguez Holdings' chief technology officer. His integration into both the business and the Whitman family had been seamless, helped by his natural diplomatic skills and Henry Whitman's overwhelming guilt about missing 28 years of his son's life. "Dad's here," Diego announced, gesturing toward the circular driveway where Henry Whitman was stepping out of a Tesla Model S. At 65, Jonathan's father had embraced both his expanded family and the environmental consciousness that came with being related to renewable energy executives. Henry spotted them on the terrace and waved, his face bright with a happiness that had replaced the devastation of learning about Patricia's decades of lies. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago, amicable but absolute. Patricia was currently in her 3rd month of intensive therapy in Switzerland, working through the racism and control issues that had poisoned her relationships for decades. "How's the communication with Mom going?" Jonathan asked Diego as Henry approached. "Better," Diego replied diplomatically. "Her therapist says she's making real progress. Last week she sent me a handwritten letter acknowledging the pain her abandonment caused. It's a start." Henry joined them on the terrace, embracing both his sons with the enthusiasm of a man making up for lost time. "Boys, Camila, beautiful day for changing the world." It had become his standard greeting, a reference to Rodriguez Holdings' recent expansion into carbon capture technology, a project Jonathan had proposed during his second board meeting. His background in software development had proven invaluable in optimizing the algorithmic processes that made large-scale environmental restoration economically viable. "Speaking of changing the world," Camila said, "we got confirmation this morning. The Whitman-Rodriguez Environmental Initiative has been approved by the Department of Energy. Jonathan's carbon capture software will be implemented across 12 pilot sites by year-end." Henry beamed with pride. "My son, the environmental revolutionary. Your mother would be, well, she'd find something to criticize, but she'd be proud underneath." They'd all learned to speak of Patricia with a mixture of love and realistic acknowledgement of her flaws. Therapy had revealed that her racism stemmed from deep-seated insecurities about her own background, fears that someone might discover her grandfather had been an Italian immigrant who'd changed his name to sound more Anglo. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. "How are things with the media?" Henry asked, settling into one of the terrace's comfortable chairs. "Completely quiet," Camila replied. "Mother's contacts ensured that our wedding drama disappeared from public consciousness within 48 hours. The senator's scandal was much more interesting to news outlets." It was true. Elena's media manipulation had been so thorough that their viral wedding videos had vanished from every platform, replaced by a financial corruption story that had dominated headlines for weeks. The 200 wedding guests had been quietly contacted by Rodriguez Holdings' legal team and asked to sign non-disclosure agreements in exchange for having their honeymoon expenses covered for the next 5 years. Every single guest had signed. "And Crystal?" Henry asked. Jonathan and Camila exchanged glances. Crystal Morrison had become something of a success story, though not in the way anyone had expected. "She's actually doing really well," Camila said. The rehabilitation program Elena connected her with specializes in helping people rebuild their lives after making destructive choices. Crystal's been speaking to groups about the dangers of accepting money to hurt others. Last month, she testified before Congress about financial predatory schemes that target struggling actors and models. "She called last week," Jonathan added. "Wanted to thank us for not pressing charges and for giving her a chance to make amends. She's engaged to one of the counselors at the center." Seems genuinely happy for the first time since I've known her. Diego checked his watch. Speaking of making amends, we should head inside. Mother's about to announce the quarterly numbers, and you know how she gets when people are late. They moved through the French doors into the great room, where Elena Rodriguez held court at the head of a conference table that could have hosted the United Nations. At 62, she remained a force of nature, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in her signature chignon, wearing a tailored navy suit that spoke of boardroom authority. "Ah, Jonathan," she said warmly as they entered. "Perfect timing. I was just telling everyone about your carbon capture proposal's impact on our quarterly environmental projections." The conference table was surrounded by the key players in Rodriguez Holdings: department heads, division chiefs, and family members who'd earned their positions through merit rather than bloodline. Jonathan still felt a thrill at being included in these meetings, at having his ideas taken seriously by people who controlled billions in assets. "The preliminary results from the pilot programs are extraordinary," Elena continued, pulling up holographic displays that made Jonathan's tech company's presentation equipment look like stone tablets. "Jonathan's optimization algorithms have increased carbon capture efficiency by 37% while reducing operational costs by 22%. Applause filled the room. Jonathan felt Camila's hand squeeze his under the table, her pride in his contributions evident. "Which brings us to the expansion announcement," Elena said, her voice taking on the tone that indicated major news was coming. "The European Union has approved Rodriguez Holdings for their Continental Carbon Capture Initiative. The contract is worth €43 billion over 15 years. The room erupted in celebration. It was the largest environmental contract in corporate history, cementing Rodriguez Holdings' position as the world's leader in climate restoration technology. "Jonathan," Elena continued, "the EU specifically requested that you lead the technical implementation team. They want the architect of our optimization systems overseeing the entire European rollout." Jonathan's mouth fell open. 6 months ago, he'd been a small tech entrepreneur worried about his company's survival. Now he was being offered the chance to lead the largest environmental project in human history. Yes, he managed. "Absolutely yes." "Excellent," Elena smiled. "Camila will be heading our European operations, so you'll be working together. I hope that won't be a problem." The knowing look she gave them suggested she was well aware that working together had only strengthened their marriage. The daily collaboration, the shared goals, the mutual respect for each other's expertise had created a partnership that went far beyond romance. "No problem at all," Camila said, her voice warm with affection. "We make a good team." After the business meeting concluded and family dinner wound down, Jonathan and Camila found themselves alone on the terrace as the sun set over the desert mountains. The Arizona sky painted itself in brilliant oranges and purples, a daily masterpiece that never got old. "So," Camila said, leaning against his shoulder, "any regrets about marrying an oil heiress?" Jonathan laughed, pulling her closer. "Only that it took helicopter squadrons and media manipulation to make me realize how lucky I am." "And the lifestyle changes? The security details, the corporate jets, the staff who know our coffee preferences better than we do." "I've adapted," Jonathan said with a grin. "Though I still insist on doing my own laundry. A man has to maintain some independence." It was true. Their life together had required significant adjustments. The Beverly Hills penthouse Camila had purchased as their primary residence came with a full-time staff, security protocols that rivaled government buildings, and social obligations that filled their calendar months in advance. But they'd found ways to maintain intimacy and normalcy within the extraordinary circumstances of extreme wealth. "Diego seems really happy," Camila observed, watching through the windows as Jonathan's half-brother laughed at something Henry was saying. "I think having a father in his life has healed something important." "Dad's happy too," Jonathan replied. "Happier than I've seen him since, well, maybe ever. Turns out having 2 sons instead of 1 doubles the joy instead of dividing it." They stood in comfortable silence as the desert air cooled around them. In the distance, they could see the lights of Phoenix beginning to twinkle, the city where Camila had grown up learning that wealth was a responsibility rather than a privilege. "I got a letter today," Camila said quietly. "From Patricia." Jonathan tensed slightly. His mother's rehabilitation had been progressing, but her letters were still emotionally complicated for everyone involved. What did she say? She apologized. Really apologized, not just the surface-level stuff. She acknowledged that her treatment of me was rooted in racism, that her manipulation of you was about control rather than protection, that abandoning Diego was unforgivable. Camila pulled the letter from her purse, unfolding pages covered in Patricia's careful handwriting. She also asked if she could attend Diego's wedding in December, not as an honored guest, but as someone seeking to make amends. Diego had gotten engaged 3 months earlier to Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant environmental scientist who worked for Rodriguez Holdings' research division. Their December wedding would be the family's first celebration since the dramatic events at Camila and Jonathan's ceremony. What do you think? Jonathan asked. I think people can change if they're willing to do the work, Camila replied. And I think Diego deserves the chance to have his birth mother at his wedding if he wants her there. Even after everything she did? Especially because of everything she did. Forgiveness isn't about excusing harmful behavior. It's about choosing not to let that behavior define your future. Jonathan marveled at his wife's capacity for grace. It was one of the qualities that had attracted him to her in the first place, back when he thought she was a struggling file clerk with a generous heart. Learning about her wealth hadn't changed her character. It had simply revealed the full scope of her ability to use resources for positive change. I love you, Camila Rodriguez Whitman, he said, using the hyphenated name she'd adopted after their wedding. I love you too, Jonathan Whitman Rodriguez, she replied, referencing his own decision to hyphenate his name as a symbol of joining their families completely. As they headed inside, Jonathan's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen. Saw the EU announcement on the news. Proud of you, brother. Drinks next week to celebrate. The message made Jonathan smile. His friendship with Marcus had survived the wedding drama, though it had required honest conversations about assumptions and biases. Tom Bradley, Jennifer Walsh, and Dr. Stevens had all made similar efforts to rebuild their relationships with both Jonathan and Camila, understanding that their skepticism had been rooted in prejudices they needed to examine. Good news? Camila asked, noticing his expression. Marcus wants to celebrate the EU contract. I think he's finally forgiven himself for the investigation. Good. You need your friends. It was true. One of the challenges of extreme wealth was that it could isolate you from genuine relationships. But Jonathan had been careful to maintain his friendships while being honest about his new circumstances. The process had been illuminating, revealing which relationships were built on genuine affection and which had been transactional from the beginning. As they prepared for bed in Camila's childhood suite, Jonathan reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in 6 months. He was now a billionaire by marriage, an environmental innovator by profession, a brother to someone he'd never known existed, and a husband to a woman whose strength and grace continued to amaze him daily. The scared, angry man who had considered annulling his marriage on his wedding night felt like a stranger now. That version of himself had been so focused on what he might lose that he'd nearly missed what he could gain. Any word from the wedding planner about next year's vow renewal? Camila asked, settling into bed beside him. They decided to hold an annual vow renewal ceremony, partly as a romantic tradition and partly as a way to process the ongoing changes in their relationship. Next year's event would be much smaller, much more private, and hopefully much less dramatic. She suggested the estate in Tuscany, Jonathan replied. Just family this time. No business associates, no distant relatives, no one who might hire private investigators. Camila laughed, the sound filling their bedroom with warmth. Just us, Diego, Sarah, your father, Elena, and maybe Patricia if her therapy continues going well. Perfect, Jonathan said, pulling her close. Though knowing our family, we'll probably still end up with some kind of dramatic revelation. As long as it doesn't involve helicopters and media blackouts, I can handle it. They settled into comfortable silence, listening to the desert wind outside their windows. Tomorrow they would fly back to Los Angeles, where Camila had meetings with environmental scientists and Jonathan had code to write for the European project. Their life was full of purpose, profit, and the peculiar challenges that came with trying to save the world while managing billion-dollar budgets. But tonight, they were simply Jonathan and Camila, a couple who had weathered the storm of secrets revealed and chosen to build something stronger from the wreckage. In the morning, Elena would announce that Rodriguez Holdings had achieved carbon neutrality across all operations, making them the first major energy company to actually reverse their environmental impact. Diego would present his plans for expanding their renewable energy patents into developing nations. Henry would share his excitement about becoming a grandfather, as Diego and Sarah were expecting their first child in the spring. And Patricia would continue her therapy, working toward the day when she might earn forgiveness from the family she had nearly destroyed with her prejudice and manipulation. But those were tomorrow's victories and challenges. Tonight, love had won completely, wealth had found its purpose, and family had been redefined by choice rather than circumstance. As sleep claimed them, Jonathan's last thought was of their coffee shop meeting 3 years earlier, when a file clerk with beautiful eyes had asked if the seat beside him was taken. He'd had no idea he was talking to an oil heiress. She'd had no idea he would love her enough to choose growth over fear when the truth finally emerged. Sometimes the best endings were really just the beginning of something even better. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.